may dwell in our hearts. As Jesus continued his journey to Jerusalem, he traveled through Samaria and Galilee. As he was entering a village, 10 lepers met him. They stood at a distance from him and raised their voices, saying, "Jesus, Master, have pity on us." And when he saw them, he said, "Go, show yourselves to the priest." As they were going, they were cleansed. And one of them, realizing he had been healed, returned, glorifying God with a loud voice. And he fell at the feet of Jesus and thanked him. He was a Samaritan. Jesus said in reply, 10 were cleansed, were they not? Where are the other 9? Has none but this foreigner returned to give thanks to God? And then Jesus said to him, "Stand up and go. Your faith has saved you." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
As I was going through the readings this week, 3 kind of themes kind of emerged that kind of spoke to me. So I'm just going to share those 3. 1, the sense of loss. 2, the passage of God's time compared to human time. Kind of a big difference. And 3, of course, the obvious one, the spirit of thanksgiving, giving gratitude and thanks for God's blessings. So let's look at loss first. So, you know, leprosy, terrible disease. We call it Hansen's disease today. It was a horrible disease, and if you had it, you had so much loss. First of all, you had the loss of your health, right? It was a terrible disease, you know, where parts of your body could just, at one moment, just slide off your body. You could lose your nose, you could lose an ear, you could lose a finger or a toe, all right? You also had this horrible, horrible smell, you know, rotting flesh. It's not very pleasant, all right? And so you have all that loss. Plus, you have the loss of your job, your livelihood. You couldn't work, all right? So there goes your income. Plus, and probably the worst of all, the loss of community, right? You were not only sent out of town, you were kicked out of town. You couldn't be with your family. You couldn't be with your friends. You couldn't be in the community. You couldn't go to the market. You couldn't go anywhere. Right? You had to be on the outskirts of town. And so this tremendous amount of loss in getting this dreaded disease. That's what Naaman in the first reading was dealing with. Alright? Now let me give you a little background on this guy. He's quite a character. First of all, he wasn't Jewish. He was Syrian. Okay? And he was an army commander, so he was very wealthy. Alright? And his troops, his command was right at the border of Israel and Syria. Right? And back then, those 2 countries hated each other, just like they do today. That hatred is still there. Right? And so they really didn't like each other and want anything to do with each other. So Naaman gets leprosy. Now Naaman's wife, one of her servants, was an Israeli. Right? He was Jewish. Right? And this Israeli servant, or slave, goes to her master, Naaman's wife, and says, "You know, I think he can be cured of this if he goes over to Israel, all right, and finds a man called Elisha, the one who succeeded Elijah. And if he goes there, he's going to be healed." So the wife is all excited. So the wife tells Naaman, "All right, there's a chance, there's a cure. Just go over to Israel, find the man Elisha, the great prophet of God, and he'll heal you." And Naaman's like, "What? You want me to go in there? Enemy territory?" And the wife's pretty much saying, "Well, all right, you can just stay here and die then." So he goes. And he brings a few soldiers with him. But he's going into enemy lines. He tracks down Elisha the prophet. All right? And Elisha, "Sure, God will heal you. God loves you. Of course God will heal you. Just go to the Jordan River, dump yourself 7 times." Now, that sounds like really nice. Good plan, especially for us. We think of the Jordan River and it's this holy river. This is where Jesus was baptized, this is where John the Baptist was. But if you've ever been to the Jordan River, it's more like a creek. It's muddy and dirty and narrow. It has a nice little current to it, but it's very nondescript. All right, and so Naaman looks at this river and says, "I'm not going in there. This creek." All right, and his soldiers made him, "You get in there. You dump yourself 7 times." So we did. And as you heard, right, from the reading, when he came out of that water, his skin was soft as a baby's back. All right, smooth as silk. All right, and impressed by this God of Israel. He wants to thank Elisha for doing this. First of all, he says, what did I get you? He was a rich man. He didn't give him anything. And Elisha's like, don't give me nothing. Don't thank me. Thank God. So that's what he does. He takes 2 new loads of dirt. And that sounds really weird to us. But you get a couple loads of dirt. All right? Especially when you're living on the border. Their dirt is the same as the other country's dirt. You know, it's the same. They're very close to each other. But there was a common ancient belief back then that a God could only work under his own territory, his own earth. All right? He has a much better connection to the earth. And so he said, well, I'm going to worship this God from now on. And so he takes a couple mules of Israeli dirt and brings it home to the other side of the border to Syria. All right? Now, you see what happens here with David? He goes from loss. He goes from all that loss he had, and he moves into thanksgiving. He thanks God. He thanks Elisha. And I think that's a lesson for us. When we go through loss, when we go through a loss of a relationship or a marriage or a loss of our health or some financial troubles or a family crisis, when we go through all those kind of losses and we don't see any light at the end of the tunnel, the symbol we get from this reading is to hang in there, to persevere, right? And hope in God and thank God for being there. God doesn't promise to take it away, but God does promise to walk with us and be with us during those times of crisis. So you look at the gospel now, and this is that whole idea of Thanksgiving. But also, let's go to that thing about time, God's time. All right? When Jesus comes into a town, he's on the outskirts because that's where the lepers are. He's ready to go into town, and they all stop him. Hey, heal us. He says, okay, go show yourselves to the priest. That's kind of a weird thing too, isn't it? Wouldn't you go to a doctor? You know? But the priests had the authority, they had the education, they could read and write. And back then, if you got leprosy, it was considered a punishment or a curse by God. So where do you go? You go to the priest. All right? And the priest has to certify you. Once the priest certifies you, then you can go back into the community. So, notice that little detail. I don't know if you noticed it or not. But did Jesus heal him right away? It was a process. It took time. By the time they got to the priest, we don't know how much time that was, they were healed. And can you imagine those 10 lepers as they're going from Jesus to the priest thinking, wow, I can walk a little bit easier right now. Wow, I don't smell that myself so much anymore. Wow, those sores are going away. And by the time they get there, they're healed. And the priest certifies them, they're back in the community. It's a process. Same thing for us. When we need healing. And I'm not just talking about physical healing. I know, since I got hit on my motorbike, you know, they told me 8 weeks. I'm like, ugh. And I'm only at 5.5. I'm still certainly not 100%. But I'm just talking more deeper than that. When we get hurt, when we really get hurt by somebody, or we experience some kind of loss or trouble, it just takes time. You know, we live in a real instant culture, don't we? Whatever we want to know, we just look up on our phones and we got it. We want everything now. We love efficiency. We love speed. We love, you know, having everything done quickly. God says, you're talking about human time. God's talking about the fullness of time. The Greeks had it best. They had 2 words for time. They had chronos and kairos. Chronos is like chronological time. You know, seconds, minutes, hours, I think. Kairos means the fullness of time. The completion of time. God's time. And so, for us in life, this buy me, show me, take me attitude, you know, and want everything right away. And God's saying, it doesn't work that way. You'll get your healing. You'll be better. But it's going to take some time. It's a process. And we have to be a little more patient with Kairos, with God's time. Let me give you an example. Wonderful story. It happened in 1979. There was this woman named Stephanie. And one day, it was on March 18th, 1979, she lost her husband, her son, her daughter-in-law, and her son-in-law in a plane crash in Aspen, Colorado. It's one of those private jets, you know, and it crashed in the mountains there. And so she lost her whole family. She lost everything. and she thought she was never going to get out. So you know what she did? She, ever since like the day after the tragedy, she kept a journal of her feelings and thoughts. And so I'm going to read you just a little paragraph from her entry on May 8th. It was about 6 weeks after this terrible tragedy. My burden is heavy, but I don't walk alone. My pain is unrelenting, but I thank God for every moment that He blessed me with. I pray that my life will be used for His glory, that I might carry my burden with Christian dignity, and that out of all my devastation, may God's kingdom become apparent to someone who's lost and in pain. I must climb to a different plane now and search for a different life. I cannot replace or compare my loss. It's my loss. And I'm not strong. I'm not brave. I'm just a Christian with a burden to carry and a message to share. I have been severely tested, but my faith has survived. I've walked in hell, but now I walk with God in peace. John, Edward, David, Carla, and Richard are in God's hands now. I'm in God's arms, and His love surrounds me. And I know this old rose will bloom again. So if you're going through loss, if you're going through pain, if you're going through some tragedy, and you don't see any light at the end of the tunnel, you persevere like Stephanie did. You hang in there. You do what you can, and you leave the rest to God. And one day, whenever that day will be, you're going to bloom again. And you're going to blossom. And you're going to shine. And you're going to be beautiful. And you are going to just bask in the love and glory of God. That's something worth holding down. Finally, Thanksgiving. You notice the 10 lepers, only one comes back to get things. Right? And as we come up on Thanksgiving next month, this is kind of a little prep for Thanksgiving, isn't it? To get us ready. Get us more to have that attitude of gratitude. There's only one thanks God. All give you, only one gives thanks. Alright? It just reminds us to be a little more appreciative. Back when I was living in St. Louis, I was in a kind of a rough neighborhood back then. It was in the 80s. It was called Lafayette Square. Now it's a beautiful neighborhood. But back then, it was rough. Right? And the parish I went to, Immaculate Conception, was in this rough neighborhood. It was mostly African American people. And there was one parishioner I met when I was there. His name was Leon Mitchell. And by then, Leon was older, and he had suffered 2 massive heart attacks. You know those ones they call the widowmakers? That, most people just die. Well, he survived 2 of them. Right? He couldn't read, he couldn't write, but all of his man was filled with wisdom. And every time I would see him, I'd say, Leon, how are you? And he'd say the same thing every time. I'm here. I'm here, thanks be to God, I'm here. He was just thankful to be alive. Anytime anybody asked him, how's he doing? He's here. And he's thankful. So even through loss, right? Even through impatience and not accepting the fullness of God's time, even through tragedy and everything, may we have that attitude of gratitude, right? That spirit of thanksgiving, because one day we're going to bloom again. Amen.